History Alive, Chapter 26, Understanding Post-War Tensions. Now, after World War I, the United States came back and celebrated. However, there were some downturns. One was the demobilization. How do we go from wartime to peacetime? Now, in that transition, we see an awful lot of things happening. We see a lot of things being shut down. Number one, government officials canceled contracts, meaning lots and lots of factories closed. If factories closed, that meant people were out of work. Remember, we had a huge migration of African Americans moving up from the South to the North. We see a reducing of crop prices because overseas, meaning Europe, people were trying to buy grain and other crops that the Americans were producing. After the war, they started producing their own crops. So the farmers lost an awful lot of money. We see tons and tons of people being displaced because factories and jobs wanted to give workers who went off to fight the war their jobs back if they were able. Now, this creates what's called a recession. Make sure you write down the words demobilization, a transition from wartime to peacetime, and a recession, a decline in economic activity and prosperity. You might want to pause here. All right, labor tensions. Now, you can imagine that this is going to create huge tension. Now, between the workers who have stayed and have been working and the soldiers who came back, we also see that it is a market that is driven by the owners. The owners have so many workers, they can pick and choose who they want to work for them. Now, the workers are going to organize into labor unions, and the labor unions are going to take different stances on workers' rights. Some of them are going to be very proactive. Some of them are very accommodating for the owners. Now, the American Federation of Labor, which still today is one of the biggest labor unions, only represented skilled laborers, people who could actually do a skill that was learned and taught. The Industrial Workers of the World, IWW, were known as Wobblies. They wanted socialism as a solution to workers' problems, meaning that we're spreading of the income and everybody's treated a little more fairly. Now, this is going to create some issues later on because socialism and communism are very scarily alike in the eyes of many Americans. Now, unions lose public support and membership, and we're going to look at that because of a lot of the things that went on, like the Haymarket Affair way back in 1880s, and also because of the ties to communism. Growing tensions in between the political things, we have a radicalism that's starting, and it's the viewpoint that they want big change. Now, one of the big factors is we saw the anarchists way back in the Haymarket Affair, and they basically want to get rid of the bombs. When we saw the Trump protesters last week, there was a big to-do in Portland, Oregon. And the organizers of the peaceful protest said that they were actually anarchists who were just trying to disrupt things, who were the ones who broke windows in the stores in Portland, Oregon. Now, Karl Marx is the father of communism, and he calls for public ownership and the means of production, and he wants to have what's called a classless society, meaning it's not based on wealth, it's not based on position, everybody is equal. Now, a lot of people see communism and socialism as really the same. But the difference is we want to have public ownership of certain things, but not all things. Now, we actually have some socialist aspects in our own culture. Things like electric companies, postal service are government owned. So it's a little bit more regulated, and you're not going to have that competition, and things are a little bit more consistent. The Red Scare, subversives, and civil liberties. People were really scared that communism, that socialism was going to sweep through America. And there was this big swing towards conservatism. They want to make sure that the Americans are taken care of, that these new communist ideas for the people who had worked so hard were not taken away from them. They saw immigration as a big factor, so they passed the Emergency Immigration Act of 1921, and they reduced the number of immigrants allowed in the United States. This is called a quota system, and we saw this back in the Industrial Revolution. We want to have a limit on the number of people coming from a certain area. The KKK and the ACLU. Now, the KKK is Ku Klux Klan, and they made a resurgence during the 1920s. Actually, this was realistically their high point. They saw African Americans, Jews, Catholics, anybody who was like that as un-American. And they use cross burnings, kidnapping, they use intimidation factors to terrorize communities. Now, the ACLU is the American Civil Liberties Union, and they specialized in defending people who were maybe not the norm. Sacco and Vanzetti would have been supported by people like the ACLU. Remember, those are the two men who were accused of murder, and they were seen as communist spies and really probably treated unfairly. Enduring racial and religious tensions, our success in our education and industrial politically is based on the protection of a nation founded by ourselves. Now, there's a huge movement where African Americans were saying, hey, we're getting all this pressure, maybe what we need to do is we need to move back to Africa and take care of our own. The Anti-Defamation League is the other one who really wanted to stop false accusations. One of their main goals was to help people who were accused of communism, people who were discriminated against because they were Jewish or Catholics. And there was this huge fear that if a Catholic got into a position of power, that what would happen would be the Pope would be who would be leading the country. So here's my question. What effect did post-war tensions have on America's founding ideals? Think about that, and hopefully you've taken some good notes.